Today, I am not so much taking a trip outside my comfort zone, instead I'm taking a 2-week-long, all-expenses-paid vacation to Danger Disneyland, because I am driving this, a 2005 Ford Mustang GT, a car that already has a fearsome reputation, as anybody with access to YouTube will attest, and as standard, this car makes 300 horsepower, but the one I'm driving makes closer to 800. And it's starting to rain, so although it is a very American thing to ask, this is going to be a very American day, so if you don't mind, maybe send me a few of those thoughts and prayers. Let's go. To Americana, British car enthusiasts tend to fall into one of two camps. Those who simply don't care for anything made in the US of A, and those who, when they were young, saw a film maybe with Steve McQueen in or somebody else, and they said to themselves on that day, I shall have one of those. And that has always been and will always be their dream car, and everything else they simply don't care about. For myself, I try and strike a kind of middle ground and appreciate all of the different things that America makes, including the likes of the Mustang, new and old, Chevrolet Corvettes, Camaros, Dodge Vipers, and even really weird and unusual stuff like Cadillacs that we just don't get here. However, there is something particularly interesting, I think, about this generation of Mustang, the fifth, codename S197. You see, again, to us Brits, Mustangs will usually either look like this, perhaps this, or, nowadays, this. The sixth generation car in particular has done really well here because it was the first ever sold in right-hand drive in a form that essentially anyone could buy. Just walk into your Ford dealer, I'll have a Mustang please, and you got one. But before that, it was a little trickier, and so, other than the interesting classics, most people didn't bother to import them. However, I should remind my European viewers that my American viewers for a long time had to put up with Mustangs that looked like this, and then this, and even this. When the S197 came around in 2005 and looked like this, it was really both a great step backwards and a great step forwards. And this generation of Mustang is often credited with inspiring a resurgence in retro-styled vehicles over in America, the likes of the Camaro and the Dodge Challenger and Charger, which are all in their own unique and sometimes balmy ways quite cool things. But I'm not talking about those today. Instead, I'm focusing on the Mustang. It is notable for a few things, not just because it was the first to go kind of retro-styled, but also because it was the last to have a very retro suspension setup. This has, up front, McPherson struts, and at the back, a live axle with panhard rods. And that's the sort of thing that I usually have to tell people about when I'm driving a 99-year-old Bentley, not an 18-year-old Ford. It did very much divide opinion, the decision to stick with a live axle. Apparently muscle car types really like it because for drag racing it is a very effective setup. It also made the car theoretically quite a bit cheaper to produce because it's mechanically very simple and rather durable. But for those interested in going around a corner and living, an independent rear suspension had been deemed the sensible and logical choice by many manufacturers decades earlier. Now, I seem to recall, and this could be completely and totally incorrect, so internet help me out, but when this car came out, somebody worked out that it actually could be outperformed on a slalom by a 1960s MGB GT. That's shameful. Now, as you already know, this car is not at all standard. Underneath, it is a 2005 Mustang GT, but quite a bit of work has been done to it. All, curiously, once it arrived in Great Britain a few years ago. As the list of modifications is so extensive and happily applies to more than just the engine, I'm going to hand you over to VoiceOver JM to talk you through all of the work that has been done. The engine is an MMR street mod claimed to be capable of making up to 1,000 horsepower. It features all new internals, injectors, and a Magnacharger MP112 bolted on top. The car has previously been dynoed to acclaimed 786 horsepower. The exhaust is a JBA equal length header with Magnaflow H-pipe and 2.5-inch catback system. The clutch is an XED Stage 2 with a 2-piece billet aluminium flywheel. The differential is a Torsen T2 and the final drive is 3.55. The suspension features Coney yellow adjustable shocks at the front and Tokiko at the rear, Eibach springs both front and rear with uprated Steeder camber mounts, spring seats, ball joints and front anti-roll bar. The rear anti-roll bar is by BMR Fabrication, poly bushing has been used throughout, and the rear has also been upgraded with a new Watts linkage. The brakes are Roush 4 pistons at the front with 14-inch discs both front and rear. The pads are EBC yellow stuff, and additional parts include the Hurst competition short shifter kit, a billet shift knob, gauge pod, and a Sony doubled-in head unit inside. Outside modifications include a GT500 rear spoiler, Roush front bumper, billet fuel filler flap, and FordStr F14 matte black wheels, 9-inch at the front, 10.5-inch at the back, both 20 inches in diameter. The bonnet is a Savini forced air induction hood, and the cost of the build was significant, with over £15,000 being spent on engine and supercharger work alone. That's quite a bit, isn't it? From in here, it really does feel like a proper, old-school, brutish American muscle car. The clutch is easily the heaviest, and I think any car, certainly any modern one that I've driven, Lamborghini Countach don't got nothing on this. Likewise, the gear shift, it's a 5-speed manual box. I'm very grateful for that, much better than an automatic, but it's really, really hefty. It's extremely accurate, very nice, but yeah, whoa. The suspension setup likewise is quite curious. It's clearly made to be a little bit more focused than standard, but it still retains an element of wallow. And when you go over things like little potholes in the road and the like, the car doesn't crash like some others would. Mercifully, the tyres also seem to be up to the task. One of the big problems with many an American muscle car is they have huge, great big power figures and teeny-weeny tyres. This has Michelin Pilot Super Sports, and at the rear, they are 305 section wide. I am currently now waiting for a little piece of, I think, farm traffic or something to come through, and let's mention the idle, shall we? I mean, that's a proper cami idle. It's awesome, as is the huge bonnet scoop, and I have to say, I do kind of admire some of the styling tweaks made to this car, including the side intakes. I mean, there's still windows in here. I can just see those ones up here, which that camera over there can see. Oh, I've stalled it. Yeah, those intakes up there, just in and out, which is almost forgivable because they do look kind of cool. But the ones on the side, they're air brakes. It's just, what? Why? The steering is quite nice and light. I love the super retro dials. They're actually kind of cool. I mean, they're a gimmick for sure. Not so in love with the little trio of gauges up here. They sort of do detract from the interior, which overall actually is very typical 1990s American plastic with a little bit of leather to try and convince you it's a premium product. It is a big, wide thing. This is a narrow section of road, and I am on the wrong side of the car. Yeah, you're gonna have to, oh, crikey. Yeah, all right, there we go, we're through. And we're now at my favourite little stretch of B Road, which is actually not all that wet. We've only had a little bit of drizzle this morning, but before we get some more, I suppose time to try and put my foot down and see just what she'll do. Think well of me, my friends. honesty, for that entire section, I was basically feathering the throttle. Actually, no, I was asking more of it than I thought. And I know this car's supposed to have near 800 horsepower, but I have driven other big power supercharged Mustangs before, and this, like all of those, doesn't quite feel like it's got that much. Now, I'm lucky enough to have a car that has 700 plus horsepower, real horsepower, and actually in theory weighs probably about the same, if not a little bit more than this. These are, according to my independent website, 1,600 kilos as standard. The F12 is 1,700 kilos, so for the purposes of today, near enough the same, and this just doesn't quite have the shove that I thought it would. The other benefit of being supercharged, rather than say turbocharged, is that power is all nice and linear. When you get to about 3,000 RPM as well, you really hear that supercharger whine. It's fantastic. It is possible, I suppose, that the gearing is blunting the performance just a little bit. I'm going to turn the AC on and touch it. It's getting warm in here. As I'm now stuck in traffic, other things. Well, the back seats do have some room in them. They're a little bit more generous than in other cars. Now, I think a Mustang would certainly pass muster as a dad car, were my friend Ben to review it. But I have to say, it also does look like a massive car. And I was convinced that the 6th generation, the one we're all much more familiar with in Britain, was smaller. But it's not. Just doesn't look it, though. It is noisy, this thing. I have no idea how my poor little exhaust cam is going to be coping, but when I was doing the drive-bys, for the first time basically ever, I had to turn the volume settings down on my microphone. It was struggling, to say the least. Visibility is actually generally okay. If someone hadn't stuck a fake vent over there, it'd actually be really, really quite good. I can see the picture on the camera, and it does look quite dark and oppressive in here, and that's because it is quite dark and oppressive in here. Shame that. The car is fidgeting a little bit, but it's far from uncomfortable. Asan wants to put some racing seats, possibly harnesses, and maybe a smaller wheel in this, and I think that would certainly make it a more engaging drive. I can see why he'd want to do that. These seats have just no support in them whatsoever. If you do try and go around a bend, it's not going to like you, and I will try and go around a bend in a little bit, because I've got to, haven't I? Science and all that. Okay, right, I'm not putting my boot down in first because I'm not suicidal, and it is getting wet out there now. It's been raining here a bit more. Oh yeah, there's the rear traction going. Honestly, I know I can handle a car with 700 or 800 horsepower, but we've all seen the videos, haven't we? I was tempted to open this piece by doing an impression of a Ford Mustang, which goes like, oh my God, Stephen, no, why him? He had so much to live for. And I opted not to do that because I knew I was already going to hell anyway, and I thought, I don't really want to seat too close to the fire. I've said it already now, haven't I? So, oh well. Someone saved me a good spot. Oh, does sound like the devil, this thing. I'm struggling to do 60. I think it's me. It's not the car, it is me. I'm going to say that. The conditions out there as well, I don't know, and I'd love to return Asan's pride and joy back to him relatively unscathed. He is a lovely chap, by the way, who shares much of my automotive taste. He's currently trying to build his perfect 3-car garage. He's got this, the heavily modified Mustang representing America. He also has a manual Ferrari F355 GTS, a man after my own heart, because everybody knows that is my ultimate dream supercar, alongside the Lamborghini Diablo. And he'd also like one of those, but they are kind of silly money now, and he's already got an Italian mid-engine car in the Ferrari, so he's working out what to get for the third one. He's thinking perhaps 911, and I've suggested maybe Aston Vantage, because if he had a V8 Vantage, a new shape one, that would be a kind of interesting halfway house between the Ferrari and this, and then he'd have a trio of amazing V8s, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, just there, just under power a little bit. You just feel the rear just kind of, just not breaking free, but just doing that. That was full power there at 4,000 RPM. It's just not that quick, this car. Put it this way, it's noisier than it is fast, which actually is fine by me. I have driven a whole bunch of 60s, 70s American cars, including plenty of muscle stuff, and they are all generally the same. They make lots and lots of noise. They claim to have lots and lots of power, but when you actually come to it, they're not really that quick. They'll either just struggle to move because of their automatic gearboxes and the fact they weigh 2 tons, or if they do put the power down, they'll just spin a rear tyre because they have tiny, skinny, old ones on there and they just can't cope with it. So, as far as I'm concerned, I would have happily an old school American muscle car, but you just go for the one that looks and sounds the coolest. If you do happen to own something interesting and American and you'd like to see it featured on the channel, please do drop me a line. My email address is in the description of every single video. It's talk@jm.com. I'd love to explore a little bit more American muscle. I am actually beginning to develop a bit of a rapport with this car. The first few miles were a little bit fraught because the clutch is a touch tricky, and as you've seen, it is not at all impossible to stall. It's also got oodles of torque from basically nothing. Oh yeah, what an evil machine. Oh, come on, don't stall it again. The brakes handling do seem to work. The pedal is kind of light and soft, but it's fine. No issues there. The controls back here do feel quite cheap and nasty, but then it's a mid-noughties American muscle car. That's what they're like. I was reading a few different pieces this morning talking about the suspension on this car and why it was quite so controversial. As mentioned already, the muscle car guys, the drag strip fiends, they were very happy that it retained the live rear axle, but naturally just about everybody else, and contrary to popular belief, Americans are more sophisticated than we give them credit for, and plenty of them do enjoy going around a bend, and those guys really wanted a fully independent rear suspension. Ford claimed it would have added something like $5,000 to the cost of the car. However, a few years later, a Ford insider in a Motor Trend article admitted that actually they'd done the costing and they worked out it would have only added about $100 to their production cost. Ford, unfortunately, always trying to cut every single corner. When they developed the successor to this car and they built the new Coyote engine, the 5-litre, I felt really bad for the people that had to design that, because I saw a documentary and in it they said, right, yeah, cool, all new engine, but by the way, it's got to retain these specific dimensions, I think bore spacing and bore itself, because we don't want to chuck away the old tooling that we've got. I mean, you're going to build millions and millions of these engines, Ford. If you need new tooling, I know it's not cheap, but surely you were going to get a return on your investment. The funny thing about the suspension is that the same guy who said it only cost $100 extra a car if they had gone for fully independent rear suspension also said that in order to try and develop the car to the point where with the live axle it would handle, they actually spent $198 per car extra. So they wound up losing money anyway. How true that is, I do not know, but I kind of want to believe it. I know it might sound daft given my sort of personal preferences, but I think I actually much prefer this to the later 6th generation Mustang with its fancy independent rear and its more sporty vibe. It has been a few years, granted, since I've driven one of those, and perhaps I need to revisit it, but I remember it being a very sort of disjointed experience. All of the controls, all of the elements were just odd. This has very much the same thing kind of going on. The steering is super light, gearbox super heavy. This car wears its heart on its sleeve. It's still got serious vibes of old school muscle car. The newer one is pretending to be something sporty, and I just didn't think it had succeeded. For all of its extra tech and extra suspension and everything else, I just don't think it actually was that much better in a bend. Simple as that. And I know it'd be very easy to just look at this as some sort of classless yob wagon, but I quite admire it. It is utterly and totally American, this thing, and you know what you're signing up for. Yeah, sure, it's a bit cheap and nasty inside, and some of the panels are a bit flimsy and iffy, but they're also quite cheap. To buy a standardish one of these here in Britain, I think is around the £10,000 mark. This one cost a lot more because of the work that's been done to it, but such is the nature of modified cars. It certainly costs less to buy it, having been modified, than to do the work and get one to be the same level as this. I even love the little American-style number plates it's wearing, because although I should hate them, as I do sort of any non-standard or silly-looking plate, it's all part of the look, isn't it? It is so American, this thing. I figured every time I press the start button, jets will fly overhead and someone will spring out of the dash to sing the Star-Spangled Banner. I have been to enough sporting events over there now that I'm actually starting to learn the words. There's ramparts, there's rockets and red glare, bombs bursting in air, which that poor sap has just experienced. There's some proof through the night that a flag is still there. There's a land of the free, home of the brave, and it ends play ball. Yeah. This bit's dry. Shall I try second? I'll try second, right. Because before I damn it, I've got to do it. That only took me to 60 mile an hour. Where'd the power go? Where? Maybe I shouldn't be complaining. I'm still alive and I'm smiling. You know that bit in Planes, Trains and Automobiles where they go through the two trucks and Steve Martin looks over and sees John Candy as the devil? Yeah, I feel like that right now. But it's actually a pussycat. The biggest issue this car faces in the Benz really is its lack of communication. The steering doesn't really have all that much weighting to it, and you can feel the suspension is beginning to struggle. It moves around a little, and when it just doesn't want to talk to you, you haven't got the faith to ask any more of it. And that's a shame, because I think it probably is a lot more capable than I'm giving it credit for. But that all really adds to the whole American muscle car vibe. You don't expect much of it in the Benz, so you just see those as a method to get you between various different straights. That says it all, doesn't it? She will wiggle. She will wiggle. Despite the fact it's still got cats in it, when you do pull up to a junction, you get a real waft of fuel into the cabin. So that then is a heavily modified 2005 Ford Mustang GT. A huge thank you to Asan for bringing it out, and as ever to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.